Go. Oh, welcome back to another episode of Southstar Classroom. That's Omar, that's David. I am Charles. We have missed talking and chatting with you all. And look, Omar said, Omar, you bringing in the first topic. Your hair is looking amazing, bro. You about to lead us off, and he instantly bounced on us. I don't know what's going on.
Gone.
Nah, he's reconnected, man. He probably just had some issues with his connection, man. But as we wait for our good brother Omar, man, how are you? You know, how are you doing today, David? I'll bring him up.
Okay, yeah, I'm doing good. My internet's working, so that's a good thing. Yeah, it's good to be here. I've got whenever something happens, I like notes from the field. It's something at my kid's school. You know, I like to bring it forward without breaching too much confidentiality. And so. A quick story about this week. Picked up my kid a couple days ago, and he has PE for his last class, and he looked a little upset. And I said, "What happened?" He said, "A student grabbed the ball at the end of PE and threw it right at my face, and no explanation, no provocation, no nothing." And I said, "Are you sure you didn't say anything to him? Did you put your hands on him?" He said, "Nope, totally out of the blue." Okay, Did you talk to the kid? And he said he did. The kid ignored him. Did you talk to your teacher? He did. So I'm like, good. You checked all the boxes. Maybe they'll pull you in tomorrow. He said they're going to pull me in tomorrow to learn more and have a conversation with this kid. And so the next day comes and I pick my kid up and I said, so what happened? And he told me that they brought him in and the student and he went through like a conflict resolution process. And they shook hands and you know, agreed to just like, you know, go their separate ways. But you know, the story here is like, remember my kid goes to a middle school, a public middle school, 1,500 kids. When they get out of school, it's like a sea of humanity and a sea of you know, puberty and a sea of like just craziness. Right. And it's beautiful, but there's a lot of energy there. And so, you know, my point here is like the school followed up the next day. They took the time, an administrator took the time to meet with the two kids. The administrator called me on my cell phone, letting me know that they were following up. They take student safety very seriously. The kids met, they both were very genuine. And if I had any other questions to follow up with them. So I sent them a nice thank you note and that was it. So point being, like schools, I know it's really hard, but these kinds of things are really important when you do that follow through and that parent communication, especially if it's a safety issue and your kid tells you about it. Like when you don't hear from the school, it opens up a can of worms and it kind of works your stomach and it gets your nerves going. So, you know, again, kudos to my kid's school for, you know, doing what all schools should do, really basic things, following through, communication, you know, helping kids to work out their conflicts. So that's it.
That's awesome, man. Oh, how you doing, man? What's going on?
What up, man? What's going on, man? How y'all doing? Big time.
Well, man. We you know, we're gonna come to you for the topic first, brother. You was like he bounced on us, man. You good?
Man, I got the topics. I jumped in, and all of a sudden, it's like your tab just crashed. They gave you like a sad face, and I was like, "This reminds me of the street signs in Germany. If you're driving too fast, it gives you a sad sign." And it's just like, oh, and you feel bad about yourself. But if you're driving well, it gives you a smiley face. Call him over to my place.
He's on that Texas Republican internet, the Abbott internet. That's what's going on.
Oh, is that what it is? Yeah. I mean, he's so well traveled too, though. You know what I'm saying? He just randomly dropped that German fact on us. Let me give our superstar the screen, man. Go ahead, brother. How you
This
doing,
guy,
man?
man. I'm doing all right, man. I am. We're gearing up. We've got the last week of school next week, so it's always crazy, and people trying to like pack in their calendars and schedule things with me, and I'm like, no, 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 man. Like, I will see you in January. Like, there are way too many things to fix up. We're planning like a holiday party for everybody. I'm trying to reassess my budget, but overall, man, like things are great. Came back from Charleston as a fantastic little reprieve out in Charleston, South Carolina. I ate my weight in oysters at an oyster bake.
And we lost him again.
Hey,
You know, it's the people are coming for him, man. I don't know what's going on with it. Like you said, that's that Abbott over there, but he'll be back.
He's got a district laptop. He's got a school district laptop. I don't know.
I know he might have to just come on with his phone. But
yeah. How are you doing, Charles?
Man, I am here, man. I am you know, if it keep breaking up on you, you might have to just come on with your phone, brother. But I'm good, man. I think I'm tired. I think I am. I don't know. I was telling y'all today that, like, you know, I'm back in Chicago. I was traveling and then I'm back in Chicago and it was 3:40 and I was writing and I was like, oh, I didn't miss 40 minutes of my show. Like the mental like clock in my head. So I think I got a lot on my mind. I've left a few different things though this year. You know, I've been on a bunch of boards, like major boards. Like I've stepped down from all but one board so far, and I'm probably gonna step down from that one. I've transitioned from the A Black Hands podcast, which is all love. That was my decision. I still support those guys. We're actually gonna be commenting on one of the articles that Sharif wrote today. And they are always welcome here. And I'm sure if I need to go and we need to be on there, we could be. I just had a lot going on and just, you know, wanted to build like different directions on stuff, man. And so, but I've been good, man. I think you know, dealing with this is more for you, David. Like, you know, we're beyond a year of Dirk kind of being gone and still kind of dealing with that, but I have some things in the works to continue to honor our shared work between Dirk and I, and some stuff that I've built that I hope will be somewhat legacy building, man. And then I'm gonna keep plotting my master scheme to leave and go to some remote country where only a few people know where I'm at. So I'm working on that is what I've been doing. I want to have German stories like Omar does. And so with that being said, we share conversations throughout the week just around what's going on in education. We're trying to come up with topics, and I put something in there, but it was just as a placeholder, but it really caught Omar's attention. And so Omar, can you actually bring up our first topic of the day and what our central question is?
Yes. So we got.
I'm gonna ask you why you fixing your glasses. You got it.
Yeah, man. I'm happy to fix these glasses as I'm discussing this. So our major topics today. There's really three of them. We'll see if we can even get to the third. But first is there's a fascinating article that centered around AI. And the article is essentially basically saying that, like, hey, like we have taught literacy and writing is an essential component of everyone's knowledge base. And it's a central component of what we teach in high school English. And now all of a sudden, these AI bots are able to produce papers that are better written than the overwhelming majority of papers that teachers have seen. It's a great article in The Atlantic, and we're going to dive a deep dive into it because it's really like getting into the future and debating the merits of being able to write. But then are we the old people who are sitting here being like, I remember when I used to take out a quill and like pluck it from, you know, Mother Goose and write down the Constitution of the United States of America and be like, this is a terrible thing. Are we those guys, or are we getting into the phase of realizing that technology is advanced to the point where maybe we need to not only adapt, but understand what skill sets need attention? In that respect, our man, he's have we had Sharif on the show? I feel like we haven't had Sharif on the show yet.
I don't know if he's been on the show.
I don't think we've had Sharif on the show yet. We should, but our boy from 8 Black Hands, Sharif El Mekki, wrote a badass article with a little bit of research behind it, asking, do you want your child to be happy or literate? And it turns out that the research is demonstrating that really it's one or the other. You're either going to have a really happy experience or you're gaining a lot of literacy, and we're not finding the combination of the two. But that's something that he debates in his article. So I want us to kick us off and start talking about these articles, because I think it stems into this reality that we face, gentlemen, of this and or both and situation. Here at the South Star Classroom, ladies and gentlemen, we are a and scenario, meaning we can do all the things and come and consult for you all. In fact, I was just real quick plug before I got booted off by Modzilla. Don't know what the hell is going on. And I appreciate Shayla Jones being like, school district laptop. Yeah, I need to reset the laptop. I think that's what's going on right now. I haven't reset this bad boy. But on this here laptop, ladies and gentlemen, as I was in Charleston, South Carolina, I began writing our first South Star book. Woo! And I've got, man, I am excited. I got all the chapters down, but I started jamming in and detailing a number of questions for you all to have plenty to work off of, so that when you see it, you gentlemen will begin easily writing, so that I'm not just giving you blank titles and random explanations, but I'm giving you a number of prompts and a chapter that you're going to be like, I know exactly what to write. I know what to add. So y'all, as Dr. Cole, Real Doctor, begins to evolve his practice, as David continues to consult, and as I start diving into writing and consulting, ladies and gentlemen, we got a lot of things exciting for you coming out in 2023. But why don't we kick into the topic? I wanted to get started first with Sharif's article. So let me do the quick boilerplate of what's going on in this article, and then I want to jump it to the brothers on the podcast. So Sharif dove into an article, into a report that the University of Maryland and Harvard had done studying about 53 elementary school math teachers. So this is a white paper that was released by University of Maryland in conjunction with Harvard University. And they basically did a study of these 53 elementary school teachers and discussed their feelings toward instruction. So questions like, hey, does this math class make me happy, or is this a happy place for me? Or because of this teacher, I'm learning math. Or being in this math class makes me feel sad or angry. And then they also basically assessed skill sets. Are these students actually doing a deep dive into learning? And unfortunately, what this research paper discovered was that in the dichotomy of, is my child happy or is my child learning, all of us on this podcast are like, well, why can't it be both? They found that only 6 of the 53 teachers that they were surveyed got both good achievement, meaning they were teaching the skill set and students were learning, and happiness marks from their students, meaning that the relationship building and the culture that they cultivated inside of the class was excellent. So 6 out of 53 labeled doubly good, according to the research project. But what that's essentially saying is that about 10% of our classroom teachers, according to the survey, and granted, hey man, like put this a little bit of grain of salt, right? Only 53 teachers were surveyed. There's probably, I don't know if there's a lot of like, statistical or sample bias, but it's a good jumping off point to be like, hey, like who cares? You studied 53 teachers and only 10% of them are building both a great culture and high achievement. And now what is going on with the other 90%? So of course, our boy Sharif really gets into like, well, why can't it be both? But I want to pitch it to you fellas to just get your like initial hot takes on the article. But then like my central question to take this, not just where Sharif is at, where we all sort of agree, hey, we can have both. What are the key factors in y'all's opinion that is detracting away from teachers' abilities to do both? And, as we're all consultants, B, what are the key factors that can allow for both? So, breakdown of the article, gentlemen.
Wow.
What's detracting away from garnering both? What can we suggest to gain both? You're getting some hard consultant support today on the South Zone.
Wow.
Go ahead, David.
I think before I answer those questions, I want to bring up a related issue. And so this is kind of what it looks like it can look like in the real world. Just a couple of hours ago, I was reading a story about Fresno, California Unified School District, right? A district mainly low-income Latino children. Proficiency on any state exam is running at about like 20%, right? So long-standing history of low academic achievement in Fresno. That's well documented. So they're working towards a new contract with the district. The union is the teachers union, and the big sticking point is, of course, the want or desire of the school district to include student outcomes as one piece of the pie that makes up a teacher eval. Right? It's like Michelle Reeve. I didn't know people were still doing this or even suggesting this. But I think it's interesting. It's not, the only factor. It just says the school district values academic improvement, right? So that's the piece around like educating children. So the flip side, one of the representatives from the union says, we have kids at my school, it's called Fort Miller Elementary, that come to school hungry every day. They come to school tired, this teacher said. They have so much going on, and we do the best we can. To tie test scores to our performance is just wrong. So it's like the same thing, right? Yeah, of course, kids are hungry. They're going to come to school hungry. You can feed them. You should feed them, and it should be free. And you should also have a particular type of expectation around their academic growth, right? It's not either or. And so this just reminded me of that piece. So I wanted to bring that up as a real life example of what it can look like when we're confronted with these like false choices.
I'm actually going to jump right in on that. I think when we talk, there are these false binaries, especially when it comes to poor people, Black and brown people, basically people that are being underserved in our education system. There's always these false binaries. So it's either I'm going to take care of the whole child and that kid's going to be happy, or they can learn. And I think that you have to reject that. And, I have a whole book that I wrote, but that's one of the last findings was, basically reject that false binary. And it says, focus significant attention on both academic and social emotional wellness. Like both of those things can happen. Like we're not some weird orifice. Like we're not some weird, like not orifice, but like we're not some weird, like non-human, amalgamation of all these different things, right? Like we're still human. And I actually feel very different than that notion. I feel because I was poor, because I might have been coming to school hungry, all those things, that education was just that much more important. And I need it because, when life hits me as it has, right? Like I need to make sure that I'm prepared, and I would want my child to be prepared. I don't want just a happy kid that ain't learning none of the stuff that they need to learn. So I think it's a false dichotomy, and I think Sharif did a really good job of kind of, I just think he did a really good job of context. Can you still hear me okay, David?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I think he just did a really good job of just contextualizing and saying, Black parents, brown parents, you do not have to make, these are false choices that people are offering you. And that's what I think it is, man. I feel like if I ever had a child or somebody that I cared about, and this is what I heard, I would instantly pull that child out. I would instantly not have my child under there, because you can't fully teach and you don't think that my child is capable of learning at the same clip.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason. And so it's a problem for me. But I think this even ties more into our second topic. I think, Omar, I think you did a really good job of stitching these together. But go ahead and take us to the next part, brother, before we go to the next one, man. But I think that, like, I think this is, both of these articles are really important. I'll make sure they get posted in the chat.
They're awesome, and I really recommend everyone read them. Go ahead.
And before Omar goes, I want to put this, so I won't answer fully the question, but like to move us forward, what Sharif is recommending to like cross that that gap, right? To create a bridge between students' social, emotional well-being and happiness, and a certain expectation around academic growth and performance in schools, is this piece of like cultural competency, right? And establishing like trusting, respectful relationships with your students, right? That sets the groundwork for the academic work to happen. And so I wanted to put that out there before we dive deeper into this piece, because he doesn't just call it out and say that, we can actually have both. He creates a path for what that could look like in schools and teacher preparation programs.
Yeah, can everyone hear me?
Yeah, you're good. We
great.
Get it in before you leave us again. You know what I mean?
See, I got myself on the phone now just in case, so that if it shorts out, I'm ready to go. Okay. So I think for the most part, my biggest questions around this are, what are the major deficiencies that teachers are walking into classrooms with that are either allowing them to be instructionally competent or relationally competent? And look, I know a lot of teachers love the job because it's all about, the heart. And I make this discussion with our teachers all the time that, like, teaching is a lot like the Wizard of Oz. It's a lot like Plato's Republic. Like, this is excellent teaching is the combination of the heart, the mind, and the soul, but then essentially guided by consciousness to decide which one do you need more of at which time. And that is a crucial decision. So people are like, we got to love our babies. We got to tell our babies we love them. We got to show support for our babies. I'm like, yeah, absolutely. Until you realize that that's 90% of what you're doing. And now everything else is divided up amongst that 10%. It's why kids can't read. The other teachers that are like, our kids have to be able to read. So this is all just like digging in and drill and kill, and you're seeing that a lot on, like, some of the East Coast charter schools and stuff. And then what happens is that kids hate school, and then hate coming to school, and then hate the relationship that they have with their teachers, because you've dove in so far into the instructional component, you haven't spent any time on the heart and the soul. Right. Heart being a lot of those relationships, the soul, in my opinion, being the culture of the classroom. What is fun about this place? And I think that one of the major deficiencies that are taught, look, I think teacher education programs, gents, are awful. They are usually cash cows driven in what is now an anachronistic and outdated system of theory. And this is why you've got schools like Relay popping up. This is why Uncommon created Relay in the first place, was because their teacher preparation programs were so below board that teachers were not coming in prepared with the basics of, like, unit planning, lesson planning, instructional design, data, analyzing data. They were just coming in with all this theoretic nonsense. But on top of that, I think what Sharif gets into is, why do teachers not understand the cultural coherence of our students, and what do they need in order to understand how to build relationships with kids? And I think that, like, a solid lesson on not just like child psychology, but practical, skill-based, evidence-proven techniques in order to build relationships, I think is something that's like direly missing.
Yeah, man. I think you did a great job putting a button on this. Before I transition to David, did you have anything else on this one?
Me?
Did you have anything else on this topic before I transition?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I mean, I think so. Yeah, I attended, CSU, California State University teaching programs, and I'm verifying what Omar says about most of these university-based programs. It was a lot of heart and not a lot of like technique. We actually did a lot of work around cultural competency and relationship building, but that was kind of the end goal. I'm like, okay, then when does the teaching of the academic portion start? And there was just none. There was no, like, very little about lesson planning. It was all about understanding students' backgrounds and, doing all of that important stuff. But then, like, there was a whole, like, semester or a year of curriculum that was missing around the techniques that we're talking about, the specific techniques for teaching in a way that's culturally competent, and teaching, research, science-based ways to like help children to be able to read, which is a big topic now.
Right.
So I think there's those two pieces, and then was there another? Maybe I'll just leave it there. I think, and then the last piece is you call out relay. We've got the Fortune School and the West Coast. High Tech High has their own programs. We're starting to see the proliferation of non-university based teacher training programs, and there's a lot of potential there, I would say, to do things differently, to do this work specifically that Salmeki is calling out in this piece, to like teach to the heart and teach to the head, right?
Yeah, and I would just say this as I transition this, man. Like I said, it's a false binary, and if you should be, this is what I'm saying to my community who might not be expert educators the way one Sharif El-Mekki is, and you should go listen to the A Black Hands for a lot of expertise. He's an expert in classrooms and being a principal, and Chris is one with parent voices and community, and Ray is one around like just teaching and learning in general and like leading systems and doing it very well. So you should definitely check that out. And my message for you all that are not experts, right, that are like we're pedestrian civilians, I would just say you have to be vigilant. Like if somebody is saying that they're going to make a decision between those two very vital things, it's almost like saying, hey, do you want a heart or a liver? And it's like, I need both. And I'm not going to make, that choice if I don't necessarily have to. And fellas, as I transition us, this actually ties like into the next topic, but around what's our expectations that we set for ourselves? What expectations do we have for our community? What expectations do we have for the people that teach in our community around what that needs to look like? But you know what, fellas? That'll have to come up on the other side of something. You know what that something is? We have a sponsor today, gentlemen. So join us on the other side. We're gonna hear from our sponsor, Meditative Bliss. We'll see you right in a moment.
Do you feel overwhelmed with an invincible feeling of sadness? At Meditative Bliss, we will help you overcome the inexplicable stress you get from the boring routine chores and attain the solace and inner peace your soul has been yearning for. This innovative medium will be a source of the most peaceful and relaxing free music. So get ready to experience a euphoric treat for your spirit. Visit us on YouTube and Spotify anytime. Meditative Bliss. Serene your soul.
So that's our sponsor for today's episode of Meditative Bliss. We want to thank them for being partners. And seriously, if you need somebody to talk to, you need something to listen to that will kind of calm you down, especially with how the last few years have been for a lot of people. Definitely go check them out on YouTube. Tell them that the South Star Classroom sent you. But I think that it tees up our next conversation. And our next conversation was around, and David and Omar, you all can color this article a little bit better than I can potentially, but I think it was in Arizona, and it was about chronic tardiness. And the article was talking to this brown boy who was chronically late. And then there was a new term that was coined in the article called the punishment gap. And it was basically, they felt that that people were, I guess, punishing tardiness a little bit too rough. If I left out any details, fellas, why don't you fill in those gaps and let's talk about it, because I actually have a lot of thoughts on this article.
Oh, what up? All right, excellent, man. Why don't I just go ahead and tee this thing up really quick? You mind, David?
No, go for it.
All right, cool, man. So this is not new for this podcast, but basically the article gets into the idea that like they were doing an analysis of suspensions in Arizona, and that they were finding that the, like, surprise, surprise, everybody, that the overwhelming majority of those that were suspended were Black and brown kids, even though Black kids made up 10% of the students in this particular school or this particular school district. It was like 50%, and over 50% of the suspensions were founded with Black students. But then what the article really laid into specifically was about tardiness. So students were getting suspended essentially for being late to class because they had like chronic tardiness. And then the idea became like, okay, students were calling them out and saying, so you are suspending us for being late. You're punishing us, right? So you're angry that we didn't show up to class on time because class time is super important. So now your logical deduction is to now suspend us, which is more time outside of class, in order to punish us for the fact that we weren't in class. So that is the breakdown of this here article, and the idea that like this is not making a ton of sense. And now what is going on is that, like, as you can see, civil rights organizations are getting highly involved because it is so egregiously against Black and brown students, and the overwhelming majority of those students that are being punished are Black and brown, that they're having to bring this up because this is now a situation where these students have lost so much class time as a result of their suspension that they're it's not constitutionally guaranteed the right to an education, but their legal right to an education in the United States is being deeply compromised. So that's what's up.
Yeah. So yeah, I clearly stand with Cameron Olivas in this situation. He's like, I mean, they nailed it in one quote. I think you said it, Omar. It's like, so you're going to suspend me for being late, and then you're going to make me fall behind in class more. It's like, what's the point, right? And so my quick thoughts on this are that I think the school district and school districts in general need to always understand what the root cause is of the issue, right? Students are late to school in the morning is a different issue than students hanging out in the hallway and being late to class. I mean, teachers often will, lose track of time and release kids late, and then kids are late to their next class because they got released late, right?
Yes, that happens a lot.
Yeah, it sounds like in this situation, for whatever reason, students are not motivated to be in their seats on time in their classes. So, it's possibly a motivational issue where students don't want to be in their class. Like, what is it about that classroom environment? What is it about the relationships that these teachers are making or not making with students, right? So there's definitely like adult work to be done. I think suspending kids that show up late is just like the craziest thing. It's wild. And I'm not even talking about the overrepresentation of Black and brown kids. That's predictable, in 2022. But yeah, I think this reminds me of, I've talked about it on this show before. When I was in the fifth and sixth, when I was in school, elementary went up to sixth grade. And when I was in the fifth grade, my parents moved me, my mom petitioned to get me moved out of my neighborhood school because it was not a good place. And they sent me to another school literally across the freeway. It was more white, more affluent. It was a nicer school, less violence, et cetera, et cetera. So I was there for 2 years, and I took the bus, and the bus driver always dropped us off late. And I had the same teacher for fifth and sixth grade. I'm going to say her name. She's probably not with us anymore. Ms. Dumont. She
hope you're still with us, Ms. Dumont, but if not, God bless your soul.
Well, listen to this, man. She would make me sit in, if you showed up late to her class, she would make you sit at a chair and a table in the back of the room where there was a little closet for like jackets and stuff. So guess who sat there for most of his fifth and sixth grade through no fault of my own? Me. So this resonates with me clearly. You know, I mean, talk about, I mean, I spent 2 years building up animosity and hate towards this woman for this stupid rule.
I mean, I get it. I'm with y'all too, man. I think so. Again, I love our conversation. I'm so glad we're having this because multiple things can be true. There is absolutely a disproportionality around who is punished and why they are punished. I've read about that for years, right? I've been that problem. Hell, in many ways, I still am that problem, right? Like, so I know what it means to always somewhat be the problem, and then there's unfair stuff that is happening. I think I take certain things on like a case by case thing. So now that we've seen this, and I appreciate you actually giving a little bit more light to it. Maybe I read it wrong or whatnot, but like if there's a chronic absenteeism issue, like I would say, try to get to the root cause as much as you can. But for the most part, like we can be on, like we can be on time. Like it happens. Like there's like consequences for certain things, right? Like, you know, I go to a Black Baptist church. I don't know how other cultures do it, but you can't come into the sanctuary when the pastor is preaching. You just can't do it. You got to put up one finger to walk through and things like that. It's just certain things around, you know, respect. And I think that I especially brown people of tradition, you know what I'm saying? We create these things around respect or whatnot. So we have to protect our young people and our people that you know, disproportionately treated in these type of ways. That's a policy thing. And at the same time, too, I want to make sure, right, that people are not just continuing to lower expectations. So in my mind, when I was reading these, and I remember I made that mistake earlier, Omar and David, where I thought we were connecting this article to the one that we read around low expectations or whatnot. I think that this article could be read a different way, and somebody can interpret it as, and as a result, said lower expectations for our people. Lower expectations for students that they wouldn't put on their own students. So I think it's pretty interesting, man. But I think the larger, broader point that y'all are making, I have no disagreement with. Civil rights is in there for a reason. Like they're investigating it for a reason or whatnot. Yeah. And I guess my question was, are we saying that are white kids or other kids or affluent kids showing up just as tardy and not being punished for it? Or is that just a blanket thing that's like, this is how we are punishing tardies and absences? I just was curious. I didn't see that fully outlined, but somebody else may have, you know, somebody else may have some thoughts on it.
Yes, go ahead, David.
Omar, go ahead. Okay, real quick. So this comment here. So I want to clarify something. So while I'm all for doing these things, which Elizabeth is recommending. And I actually believe in like positive reinforcement. It's a long story. It's an evolution for me because I was the principal. I was the teacher. If you were a minute late to school, you automatically had to serve 30 minutes of detention after school. I did that for 10 years, right? That was me. If I went back and had to do it all over again now, it would look different. But I think the point here is that we do need to listen to children. We do need to listen to their stories about what's preventing them from, or preventing, or not providing enough motivation for them to be at certain places on time. But the goal should always be to get on time, to be to school on time, to be to your classes on time, right? We're not going down this like sympathy path of like, oh, Charles, so I understand your math teacher is really boring and he's borderline racist. So let's talk about that. Well, we're going to talk about how we can like get you to class on time. What can you do differently, right? So the action is always to get kids to class on time. We're not lowering that expectation.
And can I chime in before you go to the next point? And I also want to be very clear. That's why I'm saying go on a case by case basis. Like there's it's like if I used to live in a shelter, and when I lived in a shelter, we went to Lafayette. I lived in San Francisco in the Tenderloin and went to Lafayette, which was in West Oakland, because that's where the shelter was in San Francisco. In the morning, this is when we still had K through 6. I was in 6th grade. My little brother was in kindergarten, and my sister was too young for that. She would have been in like pre-K. So at the shelter, they had daycare. So my job was to I would get them up. Me and my dad would kind of split up stuff, make sure my sister got to daycare, and then make sure me and my brother got to school. And sometimes I was late. Very different issue than like if somebody is just around the corner and just lollygagging the class. You know what I'm saying? Like you can kind of talk about those things. I'm
Yeah.
not a heartless person. If there's an extenuating circumstance, then we should
Yeah.
like talk about that and have it. But what I was more so saying is, oh, those kids are poor. Those kids have had these things happen to them. Woe is them. Like, that's not gonna help us in like the long run. And there's a
No.
difference between compassionate. There's a difference between empathy, and there's a difference between pity. And I don't think you can actually
Yeah.
do anything. And I want to just make sure that my words are not twisted or it's coming out the wrong way. Because I'm not just talking about just bombing on kids, but we are very capable of doing a lot of different things. Sorry, go ahead, David. I just was I was hearing myself.
I was done. I was done. Yeah, no, that's fine. Omar, what do you do when your teachers show up to work late? I don't want to put you on the spot.
Yeah, don't answer that, Omar.
I just had this discussion. I just had this discussion, but you know what? I'll jump into this really quickly because I think this is my major point about this article, which is that this is my enormous issue, I think, in the realm of education. And like, as a superintendent, as someone who has led schools, has led a school, now leading multiple schools, right? The idea is that what I have found to be true in most schools, and what I have found to be true in most people's reactions of how to do things, is that in the process of trying to eliminate thinking, you just start creating these blanket policies that have absolutely no intelligence based in it whatsoever. So David, you mentioned this earlier, and I really want to like put a pin on this point, is that no one's doing a root cause analysis of like why this stuff is happening. So it's like, oh, this kid's late. Okay, cool. Like, here's the punishment. Hey, you rack up this many unexcused absences, this many tardies. Here is your punishment.
Yep.
And what winds up happening is that what I have found, and like for our audience, I find that school people, because there's probably so much stuff coming at them that they don't want to do the thinking, that they don't want to go through the process of really designing like the root cause analysis of an issue. Is just, this is the standard punishment that we have for everybody, and we're just going to employ it because this is fair.
Right.
And they don't do any thinking. So Ron Heifetz, Professor Ron Heifetz, I mentioned him a lot. He was my professor in grad school. He's a famous professor that teaches leadership under the premise mostly of psychology, talks about something called adaptive leadership. And simply put, and this is the big point I'm trying to make about this article, but school leaders, superintendents are not practicing enough adaptive leadership. And what I mean by that is, like, you've got an issue. And the technical solution, okay, so not adaptive leadership, but technical leadership, being a boss, is you are late, you get punished. You are late this many times, you get suspended. You have this many unexcused absences, you get suspended. That is a technical solution. And this is what I think the overwhelming majority of school leaders and district leaders do. They apply technical solutions to an otherwise adaptive issue. They're not doing the deep dive and doing what's called adaptive leadership to be like, why are Black and brown students consistently more suspended than are white students? Now, for our audience, I want to do a quick deep dive into this really quick and say, listen, like, what this article is getting at isn't necessarily the fight over whether Black and brown students are chronically tardy more than their white students. Because I can guarantee someone's listening to this and be like, well, if Black and brown kids got their crap together, they'd show up on time. They wouldn't have these punishments. White kids showing up on time, that's why they don't have these punishments. What the article is getting into isn't necessarily how many times these kids are tardy. It's how many times they are suspended for a combination of either being tardy or, in many cases, what is an unexcused absence.
Right.
This is where the rubber hits the road, people. How many of you all know the rules of how to get your kid an excused absence? How many of our Black and brown parents may not know, oh, it's just as simple as I need to get a doctor's note in order to constitute this? How many white parents taking advantage of that because their friend is a doctor and they're like, yeah, we were gone for 3 days at Disneyland, but here's the doctor's note to like get this kid out. of an unexcused absence. Our Black and brown kids are getting suspended more often because the combination of tardyism and unexcused absences are large. So really quickly, and you're like, well, Omar, what are we supposed to do about that? Yo, the minute we start seeing an unexcused absence or two, our school, instead of inflicting punishment, calls the parents, what's going on? Are you guys okay? What's happening? Right. Oh, there's an illness. Here's the process that you need to do in order to get a doctor's note in order to provide for excused absences. Or we don't hear from them. Yo, we're making a home visit and we're finding out what is going on. Is there some extenuating circumstances? So this is adaptive leadership on one end to provide the parents the support to understand this is how the system works. And maybe there's some really rough scenarios here and these constitute excused absences. But on the other end, David, you're a school leader. Like, is suspending kids who have not been in school, giving them more time outside of school, an adaptive leadership response? Is that what's restorative? What do these kids need? They need more time in school. So why are we not thinking about a different solution instead of suspending them?
Yeah, it reminds me of our current, in many of our large cities, we have, there's a challenge, a crisis around people being unhoused, right? And so in some cities, including the county, the city that I live in, they write tickets for unhoused people. I'm like, this person is unhoused. They don't have money, and you are going to write them a ticket, right? And so like suspending children for being late to school or for not showing, it's totally counterintuitive. But yeah, you get into that technocratic, technical mindset. We're like, those are the rules. I mean, they got to be there for a reason, right? Must be well researched. There's got to be some benefit to it, and everyone just kind of sits around and be like, yeah, just suspend. And it keeps, so this analysis that we're talking about revealed nearly 47,000 suspensions for attendance violations over the past 5 school years across more than 80 school districts that suspend kids for missing class. The true scale of the problem is likely much larger, as almost 250 districts fail to even provide comprehensive data in this response to public records requests. Houston, we have a problem. It's major,
Well, and I agree with that. And this is the way now we're talking about it as a systemic issue, and it's kind of like marijuana the last few decades, right? Where it's like everybody's using it, but Black people and brown people are being convicted for using it, and these other people are not, which is incredibly unfair. But like I said, reading the article, and again, maybe I just read it too fast. I feel like they didn't drill down on that enough. Just for me, it felt like it was like, okay, well, because it wasn't like, oh man, I'm just sometimes I'm just tardy. It's like, no, if it's like chronically tardy or whatnot, you know what I'm saying? We can be on time. Again, take it on a case-by-case basis. I'm also pretty amped about this too, because I'm doing some really interesting research right now. I'm studying HBCU-led schools, HBCU-led charter schools, and like what their secret sauce is. And I've been talking to all these incredible school founders that graduated from HBCUs, and I'm trying to figure out what they have in common. But all of them talk about a higher level of accountability for our people, truly believing in like the brilliance of our people, not letting our kids skate, and doing it with love and lovingly reprimanding them and building a village around them, but at the same time making sure that they're able to survive and thrive in the real world. That's not going to make special spaces for them. You know what I mean? I think that is, so I think part of it is when I heard that, I'm just kind of like, man, our kids, I was dirt ass poor, man. Like 2 dope fiend parents in and out of jail. One was in jail at the time. One was in rehab at that time. And it was just like, and my dad even still kind of messed up. Was like, you still got to get your ass to school on time, bro. Like, you know what I'm saying? Don't be late. Leave earlier. You know what I'm saying? And yeah, and you still need to make sure your sister's good and make sure your brother's good. Let's go. Let's get it going. And I just feel like, I like this conversation. It went to a different place for me because of how I perceived it and read it, but I think it was good. Also, I want to just say this, Elizabeth Lisa, we are not, or Miss Liza, I hope I said that right. definitely not ignoring your comment. It's too big. But I want to make sure like people won't be able to read it. So I'll read it from here just to respect our guests. Miss Liza said, I worked at a high school and I had a kid that was always late. I had a vice principal that threw him out. He was a senior and only needed 2 credits to graduate. When I found out what she had done, I reached out to the parent and went above them. The story was a student was late dependent on traffic. He had to take his mom to work and drop off his siblings at school. Had administration asked what was going on, they would have understood. Kids was showing up. Why ruin his opportunity to graduate? I absolutely agree. And I think that smart adults with multiple degrees should be able to figure out an actual solution. I've seen IEPs even have special things written in them for certain kids that might have been traveling from across town or needed special type of vehicles to get to school or whatever the case is, right? They're like good educators stand in your power and find a way to kind of resolve the things you can resolve. But these are not, I just don't want to create another false binary. You can make sure kids are learning. You can make sure kids are becoming good citizens, and you can also make sure kids feel whole and feel good about where they are.
I think high love, right? And I'm not saying like love, like you appreciate children, you recognize the humanity of all the children in your classroom in your school. High love, high expectations, right? You can do both, and high support. And so that support piece comes in when you're talking about like, yeah, you can't just, you actually have to do the work of getting to know your students and figuring out, what their experiences are outside of school that are causing them to either show up late, not show up, or inability to do homework, be focused. That's your job as a school as well, is to do that support, to, do the research, engage with the family, and then provide the necessary supports so you can continue to expect to hold high expectations of kids. So again, it's not that false binary, it's both. And that's really hard work, but that's the work.
Yeah.
And I would just back that one up to say, like, I've worked in traditional public schools, man. And look, you've got some really incredible people in those schools, but David, you've been there, and Charles, you've probably worked with some of these folks or know some of these folks. Unfortunately, how many times have you met the folks that are like, yo, that's not my job, or there's too many kids, or worse yet, I have met teachers and administrators that straight up are just like, that kid's doomed. Like, why are you worrying about that kid? Like, just pass that kid on, let that be somebody else's, situation. Or worse yet, now you get someone who's just like straight up, racist, like, yeah, that kid's late because they're black or brown. And I can't help that. They should show up on time. That's not my job to do an inquiry. My job is to ensure that I am implementing the rules here. And what I got to say is that this then breaks down to leadership, right? Because if the school leader was one in which had a cognizance of building good relationships, leading by inquiry, understanding circumstances to get to the root cause of analysis to solve issues, well, then everybody else is going to step into, that line, right? All the assistant principals and whatnot. And then they're going to carry out these things because it's the leader doing this. If the leader is not providing that kind of leadership and that kind of understanding, then who in the school is going to do that? Because ultimately, like, unless you've got some really imaginative and, highly intuitive person that's running like at the assistant principal role, who's really going to jump into that? Or they're just largely ignored. So maybe they do that, but if the leader's not going to back them up, then, they're up a creek without a paddle, so to say. So I find that so much of this stuff has to do, again, with leadership in the district and leadership within the school, because they should be setting these tones, but they should be setting these examples, and they should be setting up these practices. And then ultimately designing and coaching and helping others, being like, look, it doesn't take a lot of your time for you to like sit down with this kid and just ask him a couple questions as to what is going on and finding out what the scenario is, so that you're getting what you want, which is for this child to have the support to be in class on time instead of suspending them through the nose. Now, I'm glad that these civil rights institutions are pushing back, because ultimately you are depriving these children of their like legal education.
Yeah.
And, ultimately, like, yeah, you're finding the rationale behind it all to be like, much like Elizabeth's story, this kid had these extenuating circumstances driving everybody to work, including his mom, and you're not going to allow for any kind of like leniency or some kind of adaptive, hey, listen, like you're going to show up late, no problem. Here's what we're going to do. You're going to make up this time this way. Or, well, how are you doing in your classes? You're getting straight A's otherwise? All right, cool. So here's a problem. Like, what if we provide you this level of support so that you can show up, make up the time that you need if needed, and then ultimately do the things that you need to do?
And I also went to a school where some kids had an A period, like that started real early, a lot earlier before everybody else. Some kids had something after school where they was doing classes, and some kids had a schedule where they came in as opposed to the, when class started at 8:30, they came in, at 9:30, 10 or something like that, right? Like listen, man, this is what I'll say from listening to this, right? One, if a teacher says what you said though, Omar, like where they said, man, why you putting all that time in there? Why you doing this, whatever? I actually think that's a blessing. And I think that adults, professional adults with multiple degrees, talk to that person. If somebody says the quiet part out loud, use that as an opportunity to actually have a conversation as opposed to us just teaching people to hide better. Because what's happening now is that people have their beliefs about people, different types of people, kids, poor, rich, whatever the case is, and they're not being honest. It's coming out in their practice, but it's not being honest in a way where people can actually have a conversation and discussion to really move somebody forward. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't want you to people are scared to say that truth though to the wrong person because they're going to get their ass fired, which probably rightfully so. And however, as a country, man, at some point, we have to get back to a place where we can like have discussions about stuff, especially if this is your vocation or this is your work. I need to better understand why you feel that way and what's going on, because I do need to, one, assess if you should be here, but two, maybe that's not the only person that's feeling that way. Maybe there's this, because I've heard, I know we got to close out, but this is reminding me of like the debate around kicking kids out of class. We're like, man, you shouldn't ever kick kids out of class. You shouldn't ever kick kids out of class. And I've seen teachers kind of get bullied into like saying you should never kick kids out of class. But there's kids that's like, look, man, it's 25 of us in here and one person is sabotaging the whole class and we can't learn nothing. You know what I'm saying? Like there's a deeper debate there. It's not as cut and dry. I just think if we're going to get to where we want to get to, people have to get back into managing and adults have to have conversations. We should probably go into closing thoughts. I didn't mean to go off on that soliloquy. I think I'm still high off of the HBCU leader conversations that I've been having. But these people were like, now I know these kids are capable of more than anybody else in this country thinks, but I know what they're capable of. And this is where I'm driving. And we're talking about kids in 8th grade that's doing college level work. You know what I mean? So the only limitations for us is the ones we put on ourselves, man.
Yeah, I like that accountability piece. I'll close on this. So it sounds like the group that you're working with right now, the HBCU group, people that are running schools, they have not forgotten the A word, accountability, and the E word, expectations, right? And what we're talking about here is like in K-12, what does that look like for educators to be able to, and school systems to be organized in a way that helps young people connect with the adults and the culture of particular schools, right? And then the responsibility that schools have and that adults have to actually do that work to make sure that they are connecting with young people. I've been kicked out of many classes. I've been kicked out of schools.
Same here.
I showed up late a lot. Let me tell you that, man. And sometimes I didn't even show up. However, I've shared the story before, but like the one thing that I did do very well in high school when I was an athlete, I swam and I played water polo, and I was a very good swimmer. I was like CIF. I went to state California championships for 100 butterfly, 100 freestyle, individual medley, and because we used to work out before school and we used to work out after school, so I needed to be in the water at 6:45 a.m. and then again at 3:30 p.m. And if I didn't show up at 6:45, my swim coach, he understood what it meant to make those inroads in relationships with young people. I knew that I had a responsibility to him and my team to show up. And when I didn't show up, he'd call my house at 6:45 in the morning and wake up my parents, and I'd be at school within 10 minutes because I knew that he cared. Right. And so you talk about a high school kid, you need to be in a pool at 6:45 in the morning to swim. That takes a very caring and a culturally competent adult to motivate this child to do that. And so, I mean, that's what we're talking about. That's what it reminded me of, like the expectations that adults have. We can set up draconian systems to punish children all day long, but we got to get to the work of digging deeper and understanding like what's happening in the background and how can we better, support kids, especially when the data looks like it does for this tardy stuff where Black and brown children are being over penalized and kept out of school when we know they need to be in school.
Absolutely, man. Great job, man. Take us home, Omar.
Yeah,
Great
man,
job today.
we're right at time, so I'm just going to kind of keep my comments short, which is some of the picadillos that I have that I think we should start beginning to think about and solving. Part of this just goes into like teacher education programs. Like we need to redesign how we're doing teacher education programs altogether, because I think teachers are coming in deeply unprepared to deal with adaptive situations and even basic situations. And this is what's leading to things like I can only love instead of teach, and I can only teach instead of love. And it's like, there's a way of doing both. And it's the kind of thing that as leadership training goes, we understand that like most of our leadership training becomes technical, and that's okay, because there's a lot of technical components in being a leader. But like, where is the adaptive component of things like relationship building, adaptive leadership, leading with inquiry, understanding how to design structures in your school to allow for, I don't know, simple things like a quick diagnostic of why kids are coming in late and how to solve that without the old school disciplinary processes. It's just that leaders are going to lead the way that they saw that they were led themselves when they were in schools. And that's just outdated. It's done. And I think this is a good segue into what we should be talking about maybe next week or the week after. I think Jubilee wants to join us next week. Gentlemen, we got to talk about whether or not we're going to have some shows over the holidays. Maybe next week is our last show before the holidays. Hell, man, all these people on HBO taking the holidays off. South Star Classroom may need to take a week or two off during the holidays.
Hey, man, I'm with it. We can have our holiday, man. I think man. I'm with it, man. And I can't wait to have Jubilee on. First off, I love her name. I'm a big Marvel fan. I just think amazing. Jubilee is an awesome name. But yeah, we can definitely talk about that. And and I'm also going to be releasing the Black Agentic parent ebook very soon. I'll just have a commercial for it next time and share that or whatnot. But a lot of what we talked about is covered in that workbook for parents around setting expectations, man. And my final thought I'll just leave on this with a friend of mine who's one of the best dads I know. Ever since he had his little boy, when I met him, this father just loves his son a lot, and he built a village of us around. So, every time his son did something good, he would like, yo, such and such did this. Can y'all give him a call? Can you do this or whatever? And this young man who's now grown, but as a kid, he had these grown men calling him and saying, hey man, good job on this, good job on that. And there was a few times his son made a mistake, and his dad went to him and said, hey man, you got to call him and tell him what you did. And he was like, what? He was like, nah, listen, you take the praise from these people. Like you can do better than this. Like these people love you and they're going to hold you accountable. And that's accountability is not around just punishing people. It is like a village of folks that love you, that want to restore you and that want you to be there. We all have very high expectations of this young man who's doing brilliantly. And it's not that we weren't disproportionate anything. All we disproportionately did was love on that young man, and it shows. And I'm envious of the type of village that young person has. So for the Black and brown people out there, if you are blessed to be in that type of position and got these young folks, man, our young people can do amazing, amazing things. They do not need your pity. They don't need your sympathy. They need you to be a professional, be good at what you do, hold them accountable with love, and make sure that they can do all the things, which includes rights. And AI will not fully take that over just yet, hopefully. That's David. That's Omar. I'm Charles, and we will see you all next week. Same bad time, same bad station. We want to say thank you to our Roku folks that are listening, our Facebook, YouTube, Twitter people that are listening, and to our sponsor for the day. Y'all have a great one. See y'all next time.